It's 6 p.m. on Thursday here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Hwang Ji-hye. And these are the top stories we're following at this hour. Ahead of a key anniversary, North Korea tells a foreign media outlet that a rocket launch is imminent. South Korea, however, downplays the comments. In a bid to mitigate the expanding emissions scandal at Volkswagen, its CEO resigns and the company vows to prosecute any employees found responsible for the affair. Pope Francis makes his first visit to the United States. He uses his first address to the country to deliver his message on a range of issues, including poverty and climate change. We begin with the growing concern that North Korea will launch a long-range rocket next month. Despite the speculation, a South Korean government official says an imminent launch is unlikely. Our Connie Kim reports.
There are no signs yet of an imminent rocket launch in North Korea. Despite widespread speculation, the regime is preparing to conduct a launch next month to mark a key anniversary. A senior South Korean government official said Thursday that there hasn't been any activity to suggest a launch at North Korea's Tongchang-ri missile launch site, nor has there been an increase in facility or personnel movement from last year. He said, however, a cover has been installed over the launch pad, which could be used to hide preparations, and the area around the launch site has been cleared. This comes after senior officials at North Korea's new satellite control center told CNN in an exclusive interview on Wednesday that a rocket launch is imminent. South Korean government and military officials say they're closely monitoring any unusual activity at the launch site. The officials say if North Korea were to conduct a launch to coincide with the 70th anniversary of its ruling Workers' Party on October 10th, they would expect the North to transfer the rocket to the launch site by the end of this month. Rocket assembly and fuel injection are estimated to take about a week. South Korean government authorities say if a rocket is launched, it will use an upgraded engine that's similar to the one used for its last satellite launch in late 2012. Experts predict the rocket could carry a payload into orbit that's 5 times heavier than the previously launched satellite. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The South Korean Army plans to establish a covert operations unit. It'll be tasked with targeting North Korea's key military facilities in an emergency situation or if a war breaks out. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
South Korea's Army Special Forces train day and night to ensure they are always ready for the worst-case scenario. If called upon in a real-life situation, the most elite branch in the South Korean Army can target key military targets in North Korea, with a range of tactics, including assassinations and missions aimed at confusing the enemy. Now, South Korea's Special Warfare Command is planning to establish a covert unit that will specialize in taking out key North Korean military facilities, including nuclear and ballistic missile sites, if necessary.
We will be able to conduct operations in North Korea. We can carry out operations independently, but we would need support from the U.S.
One of the 6 brigades under the Special Warfare Command will be turned into a covert operations unit. The unit will conduct independent training operations and will have the necessary air support for its missions.
This special unit is not a brand new brigade to counter the North Korean WMDs. It's been trained for the last 10 or 20 years, but at this juncture, Korea's strategic mindset is to send strategic message toward North Korea.
Osprey transport helicopters and attack AC-130 gunships are expected to support the special forces during their missions. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
The American aircraft carrier USS Ronald Reagan will be in the southern port city of Busan next month to help Korea celebrate a couple of anniversaries. A South Korean military official said Thursday that the ship will participate in an event on October 18th commemorating both the 70th anniversary of the Korean Navy and Korea's independence from Japan. The official added the fleet's deployment and the inclusion of the nuclear-powered carrier sends the message that Seoul and Washington will not ignore provocations from North Korea. The Reagan replaces its predecessor, the USS George Washington, as the American flagship in the Asia-Pacific region. South Korea is accelerating preparations for a round of inter-Korean family reunions slated for next month. The Unification Ministry says it has sent some 40 workers to the venue to do repairs and maintenance. The group will return tomorrow, but another 60 people will either commute to or stay at the venue on Mount Kumgang after the Chuseok holiday, with the goal of finishing the work before the event that's scheduled for October 20th to the 26th. It looks like a group of South Korean lawmakers will not be able to visit the inter-Korean Kaesong industrial complex next month for an inspection related to Parliament's annual audit of state affairs. The National Assembly's Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee had planned to inspect South Korean factories in the complex and examine the working environments of North Korean workers. A committee member told Seoul-based Yeonhap News Agency that Pyongyang gave its final no through Seoul's Unification Ministry on Wednesday. The North criticized the committee for raising Pyongyang's human rights record as part of its request to visit the site. Arirang TV, the station that you're tuned into right now, will air live broadcasts of President Park Geun-hye's keynote speeches at the upcoming United Nations General Assembly in New York. President Park will deliver 2 speeches at the UN, one for the UN Sustainable Development Summit this Saturday at 10 a.m. New York time or 11 p.m. Korea time. President Park's other address is for the UN General Assembly, which will begin next Monday at noon New York time or Tuesday at 1 a.m. Korea time. The 2 speeches will be broadcast live on this channel, which joined the UN's in-house network in July and serves 120 million households worldwide. Arirang will also broadcast several roundtable discussions on the UN meetings throughout President Park's visit to the U.S., which starts Friday and continues through Monday. Chinese President Xi Jinping made clear that his country is open to foreign business and vowed to remove barriers to foreign investment and improve intellectual property protections. Addressing a group of America's top business leaders, including Warren Buffett, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, and Apple's Tim Cook, Xi emphasized that there can be no progress in the Chinese economy without reform. Xi then toured a Boeing factory and visited the Microsoft headquarters. He will head for Washington, D.C. on Thursday, where he'll be the guest of honor at a banquet hosted by U.S. President Barack Obama. Pope Francis is in the United States this week, and on Wednesday he spoke to a crowd of more than 15,000 people on a series of pressing issues facing the country. Woo Soo-young has the details.
Addressing a crowd of thousands at the White House on Wednesday, the Pope called for urgent action on tackling climate change, saying it can no longer be left to a future generation. He said there had to be a serious and responsible recognition of the conditions facing the world's children. He also called on the US to protect religious liberties, saying it was one of America's most precious possessions. The Pope also encouraged the nation to build an inclusive society by welcoming immigrants. After his address, officials say Pope Francis held private talks with President Obama for about 40 minutes. Later in the day, at the Cathedral of St. Matthew in Washington, the pontiff touched upon the controversial sexual scandal involving members of the Catholic Church.
I know how much the pain of recent years has weighed upon you, and I have supported your generous commitment to bring healing to victims and to work to ensure that such crimes will never be repeated.
The Pope may meet with victims of sexual abuse over the next few days. The Vatican, however, says it will announce the meetings after they are held to protect the victims' privacy. This is the first time in 7 years that a papal visit has been made to the US. For the rest of his trip, the Holy Father will tour various landmarks in New York City and Philadelphia. He will make the first ever papal speech to the US Congress on Thursday, followed by another speech at the UN General Assembly on Friday. Woo Soo-young, Arirang News.
EU leaders have agreed to offer fresh aid for Syrian refugees and step up external border controls. This as the influx of migrants continues, with many calling it Europe's worst refugee crisis since World War II. Kim Min-ji reports.
Another 1 billion euros, or roughly $1.1 billion US, will be set aside to help UN agencies support Syrian refugees. The decision came after a 7-hour summit of European Union leaders in Brussels as they discussed ways to curb the influx of migrants that hit record highs this summer. The financial support is aimed at extending help to Lebanon, Jordan, and Turkey, from where millions of Syrians have fled since 2011. The leaders also agreed to strengthen the EU's borders.
It is clear that the greatest tide of refugees and migrants is yet to come. Therefore, we need to correct the policy of open doors and windows. Now the focus should be on the proper protection of our external borders and on external assistance to refugees and the countries in our neighborhood.
To achieve this, they agreed to set up hotspots to register and fingerprint new migrants in border countries such as Italy and Greece. They will also begin the process of relocating Syrians and others who need protection to other EU nations and sending back people regarded as economic migrants. About 500,000 migrants have arrived in Europe this year, and many EU countries have been reluctant about a plan to relocate 120,000 migrants who are already in the EU. A day earlier, a group of EU interior ministers agreed to allocate the migrants across 28 states based on a quota system, despite fierce opposition from 4 Eastern European countries, including Hungary and Slovakia. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now to the latest on the enormous corporate scandal engulfing Volkswagen. He hung around for a couple of days, but the company's CEO resigned on Wednesday following revelations Volkswagen had fitted millions of vehicles with software to cheat emissions tests. Son Jung-in has the latest.
An executive committee of Volkswagen's supervisory board called an emergency meeting on Wednesday to announce that its CEO had resigned amid the biggest scandal in the company's 78-year history.
Martin Winterkorn has offered to step down from his post as CEO. The supervisory board has accepted this decision with great respect for Winterkorn.
The committee stated that Winterkorn had no knowledge of the manipulation of emissions. Senior members of the board in a separate statement said an internal investigation would eventually identify the people responsible. In a busy day of developments, an opposition party in Germany claimed the German government was aware that Volkswagen was using test rigging software but let it go on. Germany's transport ministry has denied the Green Party's claims. After losing more than a third of its market value during the first 2 days of the trading week, Volkswagen shares finished up 5.19% on Wednesday. But as Volkswagen finds itself in an ever-expanding web of legal challenges around the world, in addition to a criminal probe in the U.S., there isn't much light at the end of the tunnel for the world's biggest automaker. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Tens of thousands of people in Japan have once again taken to the streets to voice their anger at recently passed security bills that allow the country's military to take part in overseas conflicts, along with demonstrators against the government's plan to reopen the nation's nuclear power plants. Organizers estimate some 25,000 people gathered at Yoyogi Park in Tokyo on Wednesday. Nobel Prize laureate Kenzaburo Oe, who was among the protesters, said the country was at its most dangerous point after 70 years of post-war peace and asked the participants to keep resisting the changes. 1 in 5 executives at Korea's 10 biggest business groups has resigned in the past year. According to conglomerate tracker Daebol.com, there were just over 2,500 registered and unregistered executives at key affiliates of the country's 10 largest conglomerates in June, down 47 from 2014. In the past year, nearly 470 executives have resigned from companies such as Samsung Electronics, Hyundai Motor and SK Innovation, and 420 have replaced them. Compared to last year's half-year report, the retirement rate for executives is just over 18%, with the average age of retirees being just over 55. A new report has found that women in Seoul spend over 4 times longer on housework than men on an average day. According to a report released by Seoul Statistics, women spend over 3 hours a day on housework while men do slightly more than 40 minutes. Men are gradually starting to cook more, but it's still pretty low. Daily food preparation time for men and boys over the age of 10 jumped from 5 minutes in 2004 to 8 minutes last year. The corresponding figure for women edged up by 1 minute to 71 minutes over the same period. And that brings us to the end of our newscast. More updates coming up at 10 p.m. Korea time, so stay tuned and goodbye for now.